Good morning. Happy to see you guys. Today we are talking about workflow optimization. And John's comment to me yesterday was, why would anybody go to a webinar about workflow optimization
in marketing?
in marketing? And the answer is because you're paying a ton of money for leads, or you're working very hard for a lot of the things that you do with your marketing. And unless you have a good workflow, you are not going to get a good return on investment. And you're going to go crazy, and you're going to drive your team crazy, and you're going to burn everybody out really, really quickly, because it's just way too much work these days to differentiate yourself and to manage leads and to do all of the things that you need to do in order to market effectively.
You sound like Travis.
Travis.
And,
all right. Okay. So one of the things that we noticed when we got into aviation, from the finance industry is actually very disciplined about their marketing, and they run it like a machine, and things go very smoothly. Every dollar is allocated. Everything is super efficient, and it works really, really well. When we got into aviation, I was actually stunned at how much money people throw at stuff that they don't know whether or not it's going to work. So we were working with a flight school, or actually I was doing business with a flight school because I was a student. And one of the things that they were doing to do their marketing was radio remotes. And what that means is they hire a radio station to come hang out in their parking lot and do this dance party, where they're playing music and they have balloons and they have, characters and other things. In the parking lot of the flight school, they have people coming in, bringing their kids, doing discovery flights, doing all of these things. It's kind of a circus atmosphere. They sign up a lot of people. And then, for inexpensive flights. And at that time, they did a thing called Groupon. I don't know if anybody here remembers Groupon, but what that is basically these experiences at a discount. And it brings people in the door, but they're not necessarily serious about what it is that they're doing. They're just kind of looking for a one-time thing or a fun weekend or something to do with their kids on a Friday or something like that. They all go do discovery flights. A lot of them sign up for lessons. Everybody goes home and everybody feels great about it until Monday, when the schedule starts filling up. Nobody can get a time that they like. Nobody can get the plane that they like. Nobody can get the instructor that they like. Everything goes completely to pieces. They have a horrible experience, and they get bad reviews on their website, all kinds of things on Google. And then they start the whole thing over again the next quarter, because they spent a ton of money, got nothing out of the deal, because everybody leaked through their funnel and disappeared into the woodwork within weeks or months of them spending a ton of money on this marketing. So having a marketing system is what prevents that. It prevents things from going crazy. It allows you to keep your hand on the throttle of your marketing. And it also allows us to do some of the crazy things that we need to do as human beings and as a team, that can be really, really difficult, even in the best organizations. Okay, so the question is not whether to do more marketing. The better question is, does your company have a reliable system for turning expertise, relationships, visibility, and follow through into demand? So I did not say perfect. I said reliable. Ours is not perfect. Ours is far from perfect. We are always working on our systems and improving things bit by bit. Every single month, we're strengthening one section of our process, whether that's delivery, or whether that is marketing, or, whatever that is. We are always working on this because I think we've got like the best team in the world. Um, Abdul, Adila, Angel, John, myself, we're all really, really dedicated to our clients. But just in the past month, we have had deaths in the family, we've had weddings, we've had illnesses, we've had weather, in different places. We've had technical problems with people's laptops, or with the with Wi-Fi and, with connectivity and other things. So there's always going to be obstacles, and the proof of a system is not how well does it work on a perfect month, because you're never gonna get a perfect month, right? We've been in business for 10 years, and I'm still waiting to see a perfect month. But, the question really is, uh, how well does the process or do the systems support what we do so that we're able to cover for it when suddenly somebody needs a couple days off unexpectedly, or when suddenly somebody needs to hand something off to someone else, or, when something like that happens. And we're going to be reading Tim Bennell's book, Quit Jacking Around, later in the month, and that has some really good stories in there as well about this. But we've got plenty of stories of our own, just with our own team, of where somebody had something happen, we handed something off, everybody knew what to do because our systems are pretty well, uh, not perfectly, like I said, but documented, and we're able to manage that. So plugging those leaks, this is what we're after today. So what you will leave with is a practical diagnosis and one workflow improvement that you can implement immediately. So hopefully you downloaded the workbook for this session. And if you haven't, we're going to publish that also with the recording so that you'll be able to follow along and do this as you're going through this with us. So the first thing you want to do is kind of see the whole system, see how these 5 phases reinforce each other. And we do have 5 phases in a marketing system. If you are one of our clients, you obviously have 5 phases. If you are not one of our clients, you probably still have 5 phases. You just may not be calling them that. So they should seem very familiar to you. We're going to find the bottleneck, or identify where you're having the most frustration or the most expense or the most difficulty. We're going to redesign one handoff, and clarify that step, that owner, that trigger, that asset, that timing, whatever it is that's falling apart. We're going to put a band aid on it today. And we're going to build a permanent fix once we identify what that is. Sometimes the hardest part is just seeing the problem and being able to identify, where are we losing people, or where is this causing the most frustration. And then we're going to build a 30-day plan to fix it permanently and to solve that problem, move on to the next problem, because we will never have a shortage of problems, but we can certainly tackle one today, right?
Yep.
All right. So success is not a perfect system. We are never going to have a perfect system. That's always been what we've been striving for, is perfect systems for all of our important business functions. But that is a horizon point. That's the rainbow that we always travel towards, but never quite reach. But the closer we get, the better our company works, and the more harmonious things are on our team, the less stressful things become for us as we're working together. And the more lucrative it becomes, because we're not leaking money, or leaking leads, or leaking prospects, or other things as we're going through our marketing systems. All right. So success for today. If 1 month from now, if you could say we made one clear improvement that reduced friction this month, then this webinar was a success. So we're going to put a 30-day time horizon on this webinar. And if you're watching the recording, 30 days from the day that you watched the video and went through the workbook, put a note in your calendar and do a checkpoint. Did you improve something, and what results did you get? And we'd love to hear what happened. We love success stories. We love our Wins Wednesdays. That's one of our systems. We love those kinds of things because that's what really keeps us going, and that's what fuels the next improvement, is recognizing, here's what we did, here's how it improved things, and here's how things are better than they were a month ago. So a couple of kind of key um, parameters to our demand engine. Uh, this is a little bit different than most of the sales training or most of the marketing training that you probably attended in the past. We've done Sandler sales, we've done Dale Carnegie, we've done a lot of these kinds of things where the object is the sale. And, that's kind of the end point. That's where you wanna get to. That's the happy ending or the wedding at the end of a Disney movie or whatever. Everybody lives happily ever after that. Um,
Yeah, but that's
yeah.
typically retail.
Yeah, exactly. So those kinds of sales trainings work fine for some industries, they don't work for aviation because we're different, right?
No joke.
Okay. Um, the second different thing about aviation as opposed to any other is that not yet does not necessarily mean no. It's a small world, it's a small industry. Just because they don't need your service today or your product today does not mean that they never will. A lot of people in aviation move from one company to another. They move up in organizations. They may not have the authority to say no today, but they will 6 months from now. They may not have the budget today, or the circumstances may not line up right, but they will at some point in the future. It's a small world. So not yet does not necessarily mean no. And the other thing, kind of core principle for this is that each phase strengthens the next. We are not trying to make a sale in one sitting. That almost never happens. Even if it appears to be a one appointment close, it's usually because they've spent weeks or months, consuming our material, watching our LinkedIn, watching YouTube videos, doing other things, convincing themselves or answering their own questions before we ever get in a room with them. So each of these phases, we're just trying to sell the next phase. We're not trying to jump from here to here, right? Okay. So those are kind of the core principles of the demand engine, which is the system or the set of systems that we use for ABCI and that we use for all of our clients. All right. So these five recurring phases, just to kind of break these out a little bit more. Like I said, if you're an ABCI customer or ABCI client, you know all of these. If you are not an ABCI client, you are doing all of these if you have a successful aviation company. You may not be calling them this, but you are almost certainly doing each of these things. The first one, of course, is prospecting. Identify the organization's people, needs, buying conditions. Um, this may be formal, this may be informal. It might be being done at an organization level, or each of your salespeople might be going off and doing this on their own. Uh, they might be using different tools for this, or different processes for this, but there most certainly is a prospecting process of some kind. If you're in business and you're making sales, you are most certainly doing something to find those customers. The second thing is an approach. And whether this is formal or informal, or whether this is inbound or outbound, some examples of inbound would be, they come to your website, they fill out a form, they schedule a demo, things like that. Some forms of outbound would be making calls, sending emails, um, sending DMs on LinkedIn. Whatever your approach process is, there most certainly is one, whether it's inbound, outbound, passive, active, whatever you want to call it. Third is your holding pattern. You want to remain useful and visible while the prospect is interested, but not yet ready. And so we usually say about 80% of the people that you approach are not ready yet. They may be fully qualified, they may have the money, the authority, and the need, but not necessarily right now. There's something that needs to come together in order for them um, to execute a deal. And I was actually just talking with a client yesterday, um, and we have to have this conversation over and over and over again because people have this idea that, well, if they want it, they'll buy, and if they don't want it, I don't want to keep bugging them. And the problem with that is that they may want it, but there's 20 reasons that they can't do that right now, or 20 other priorities ahead of this one. So you might be on their whiteboard. John and I have a list of things that we want to do when we have the money, a trip to Spain, a trip, other kinds of things, some of which are soon, some of which might take 10 years. And things move around on that list depending on the circumstances. So, if money is tight, everything kind of moves down on the list. And some things, like if our dishwasher breaks, that's going to move up on the list pretty quickly. So, everybody has a list like that of things that they are intending to purchase, but it's not a priority right now. So your thing is on their list somewhere, and you don't necessarily control the order that it falls, at least not all of the factors in that. Next is sales. Everybody jumps straight to this point, which is a problem because, especially in this industry, it's business to business sales. No amount of pressure is going to make somebody make a purchase if you are number 25 on their list of intended purchases in the future.
So let me ask a question.
Okay, ask a question.
So, and this has happened to me. So
Hmm.
on the phone talking to a prospective client,
Hmm.
and they jump and say, I mean, we haven't gone through all this.
Okay, of
And
course not.
it's okay, I want to buy.
Hmm.
Do you just sell it, or do you have, or should you go back through some of these things? And if so, which ones?
No, all of this could happen in 5 minutes or less, or all of this might happen in 2 or 5 years or more, right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So if somebody jumps to this point, their dishwasher just broke. So your thing just moved up to the top of their list. And you absolutely should accommodate that. There are some circumstances, they almost always have done some of this, maybe even without you, or maybe in an automated way. And we're going to talk today about how some of these things can be automated or happen before they ever talk to you.
I don't remember what led to it, but I remember being on the phone
Yeah.
to somebody, and I said, okay, how do I make this happen? And I thought he was kidding. So I said, yeah, just give me your credit card number. And he did.
Yeah. It's like,
So,
let's get on with it, right?
yep.
Okay. And last one, referrals and recapture. Um, like we said, aviation is a small world. Almost everybody knows almost everybody else. And a lot of our clients get 50% or more of their business as repeat business. So, how do you make that more likely and not be an accident if it is such a lucrative way of doing this? And referred customers are the best customers because they already know the drill, they already have a level of trust, they have some clue. So those are the 5 phases, whether or not you recognize them and whether or not they look like 5 phases. As John said, sometimes they've already done the work, they read the stuff you sent them, or they read the stuff you didn't send them, they read your website, whatever. Their decision's already ready to go by the time you talk to them. So it looks like you're just here when actually all of these other things have already happened. Does that sound convincing to you, John, or are you still being Mr. Skeptic?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
As a side note, and no interest to anybody else,
Okay.
the mini air conditioner I got is working.
Oh, hallelujah.
I mean, the temperature's gone down enough in here to make it work.
All right. Speaking of things that you bought, that sometimes actually work the way they're advertised. What a surprise. And that was an inexpensive little Chinese thing that, was kind of doubtful, but we bought it anyway and it worked. So I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I was gambling on it, and it's actually working.
It's a good gamble. All right. Okay. So workflow optimization usually starts at a handoff. So usually it's when something changes hands. And even if you're a one person organization, you can drop something in between doing one thing and doing another thing. And then when you come back to this one, that one is dropped. So, I do this all the time. I drop my own balls while I'm juggling a bunch of work. So, it's usually during a handoff that something loses momentum or that something drifts or that something goes astray. And if that happens pretty frequently at the same place, that's the best place to stick a band aid on it today. And then over the next 30 days, work on making a permanent fix and making that uh, bridge more permanent between one phase and the next. So, this is the place where we want to look as these red arrows, right? So this is almost always when we're working with a client. If they're having trouble making sales, it is because one of these arrows is broken. So in some cases, one of the most common is that the context isn't captured. So you have a prospect that comes in and he tells you his whole story, and he's really excited about your product or whatever. Something happens, there's a delay, and they're not followed up with. And so all of that enthusiasm is wasted because a step was missed. You didn't get back to them in time. You didn't answer their question properly. They call your company back, get a different person, have to tell their story all over again. Something like that happens, and it's so frustrating for everybody. We've all been on the consumer end of this where you tell somebody your whole problem and somebody's going to fix it for you, and then for some reason there's a delay and they say, "We're gonna have to call you back because whatever." And then all of the context gets lost. So that's
Happens to me more times than I care to admit.
exactly. So that is the problem. This is the most common reason. This is the most common break in the whole system, and it's this error right here, and it is this problem right here. Context is not captured.
Yep.
So how can you fix that? If you are using, of course, the CRMs, the fancy CRMs that cost a lot of money, the Salesforces, the HubSpots, the other things, promise to solve that problem, but they can't solve this problem unless somebody is willing to actually enter the notes into the system. And that
Because even if it records all your
Mm,
conversation,
yeah,
you're not gonna spend an hour, go back and review it when they call again, you can't.
exactly.
So you have to, what's the word? Compress it down into a 3 bold-based bullet points so that gets your attention and said, "Oh, yeah, I remember that."
Mhm. Our solution to this has actually changed a lot in the last year because the technology has changed. So without spending money on a fancy CRM or anything like that, and Angel's nodding because you probably know exactly what I'm doing, I am recording our sales calls, getting them transcribed, getting them boiled down to notes, and I am creating a GPT for each sales call. That way, when a person calls back, and it's a shared GPT for our whole organization. So if any one of our people runs into any one of our prospects, if they're in the GPT, then the whole context of that call, including the recording, is captured. Actually, it's a step further. If I want to capture the recording, I have to set up another technological solution, a Basecamp folder or a Dropbox or something like that. But capturing context is something that there are tools for now that there never used to be. And I'm not going to sell you any particular tool or tell you that any particular one is the right one for your organization. But there are ways to capture all of the context now that there weren't even 6 months ago, that are really, really good and really efficient. So there is never an excuse to drop that ball. I think, given the technology there is today. And so we work with clients on how to set that up and what their sales process is and how to make that work. Um, the approach is this is assuming an outbound situation. Let's say you figure out somebody is a perfect prospect because they have a fantastic problem that you can solve and everything, and you want to approach them. This is another way that we can use technology and other things to figure out what is the most appropriate way for this person to be approached. And usually we recommend two or more media. And we've talked about this in our prospecting workshop because we put these two steps together. But is it a letter? Is it an email? Is it a postcard? Is it a LinkedIn DM? Is it all three of those things? Is it meeting them at an event, inviting them to a breakfast, having a cup of coffee with them? Whatever it is, this is another section that has to happen. And then this is another, I would say this is the number two ways that the system breaks is this arrow right here between approach and holding. And that is if you approach somebody and they say, "Oh, wow, this is great. I really love your product or your service. I really want to work with you, but I'm not ready yet." And okay, so there's some period of weeks, months, years in which the circumstances are not right, and then you're not following up with them enough or whatever, they forget. They remember, hey, I remember going to coffee with somebody at one of these events and we talked about this, and I really need that now, but I'm just going to go Google for that service because I don't remember who it is that I talked to. I can't find their business card in my vast pile of trade show swag. And I don't remember their name, and I'm embarrassed that I don't remember their name, but I don't. So I'm gonna go Google that service, and I'm gonna go with the first one I find because I'm sold on the service. I didn't make that connection with that person, or that connection has dissolved, and I no longer have that person's contact information. Most common problem between holding and sales is that you never ask for the sale, you never create the urgency. So something that they could buy whenever, unless there's urgency on their side or on your side, then it just remains on their whiteboard, their list of things that they want to buy someday. And there's no urgency and it never drifts to the top because there's not really a reason to do that. So creating urgency is something that we can work on with clients as well. And any of these can take many different forms. It might be hey, the FAA just changed a regulation, so now you need this kind of equipment in your aircraft. Something like that might happen that creates urgency outside of you. You might need to create hey, we're running out of inventory on this part. I wanted to give you first crack at it, so that you can have this in your inventory rather than our inventory in case something happens. There's lots of ways to create urgency, but sometimes that's a broken arrow as well. Most common broken point between the sales and the relationship. um, this happens when somebody sells you something and it breaks and you never hear from, or it just doesn't work quite the way you wanted it to. The onboarding doesn't fit. It isn't what you expected. Maybe they oversold the product or service, or there was a misunderstanding. And this happens in the best of circumstances. This has happened with us and clients where they come in with an idea in their head and it's not exactly the same as the idea in our head of how we wanted this relationship to work. So the way that you can improve this is by improving your onboarding process and making sure that you're communicating super well during the sales and onboarding so that you're not setting expectations that are not unrealistic or that you're correcting any assumptions that they have. All right. So what you're going to do if you have the workbook in front of you is circle the broken arrow in your organization or the biggest broken arrow. There may be more than one, but you're only going to solve one today. Sound good? Mhm. Anybody want to volunteer any example of a broken arrow that you've seen in the world or that you've seen with us even?
Well, it occurs to me that what you're calling onboarding
Hmm.
can't take too long, because if it does, why would I do that? Because I'm paying for that.
Yeah.
I mean, in past experiences, uh, it's awful easy to lose people there.
Yeah. That is true. So you can overdo onboarding. You can also underdo onboarding. One of the best experiences I can think of is when we bought the 172, picked it up from the factory. They gave us a tour. They gave you the baby pictures of the airplane going through the factory. It was a great onboarding situation, but they wanted us to go to Kansas City or to Wichita to pick up the aircraft. And
Actually, it was Independence, Kansas.
Independence, Kansas, exactly. I couldn't go because I was working. So, I mean, in some cases, it's just not, technically feasible, but I'm really happy they did what they did, and I'm really happy you were able to go. So I think that was a great example of an onboarding. Do you have a bad example of an onboarding?
Yeah, that was actually that process took 3 days.
Yeah.
Uh, but it encompassed everything you do when you do what you do, but you people in general, unless they're buying physical objects like that, don't have the time or won't take the time.
Yeah.
And in fact, they, I think they would modify their onboarding process because I was a pilot
Hmm.
and I was buying it initially for me and you.
Mhm.
Um, they did all the normal stuff. Plus, they gave me a biannual check ride, an instrument check ride, and then I flew with the test pilot who had to go check some stuff off. And I said, "Oh, I want to try this." He said, "You can't get into anything I can't get you out of."
Which is a tall order, right?
Okay, I said, "Okay." And I
Mhm.
tell him what I was going to do before I did it, and found out some amazing things about that 2008 172 that they won't advertise because they just won't.
Yeah,
It's an amazing aircraft, and
and
that,
they
that,
undersold
that,
it.
but
Yeah.
that step of the process,
Mhm.
most people wouldn't go to.
Yeah.
He'll fly with the test pilot on his final check flight to check. I mean, yeah, the big list of stuff he was checking off and do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so the onboarding was optional, some people can do it, some people can't, and it also was adapted to you so that they got you up to speed so that you were comfortable and qualified to do everything you wanted to do with this airplane.
Yeah, because I
And
was going to fly across country back to here,
yeah,
and I had to stop somewhere. I don't remember where I stopped to pick you up,
right?
and then we came back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a couple of things that have to happen between here, you have to make sure that and I guess, software is another really great example. When someone buys a piece of software, they expect to just install it and have it work. But that almost never happens the way people expect. So, the onboarding might be a series of little pop-ups that say, "It looks like you're trying to do this. Here's how you go about that." And Canva did that, I think, very, very well with their last rollout. Basecamp did that not really all that well with their last rollout.
Yeah.
Um, we're all kind of frustrated with that. But, that onboarding step needs to be have a light and a heavy version, I think, that people can choose and can adapt to themselves so that they can use your product or service and be super happy with it. All right. So, yeah, workflow optimization is the removal of ambiguity at the moment responsibility changes hands. So that is where we're going with that. Hopefully, you've circled one of the arrows, and you have a pretty good idea of which arrow is broken and which of these things is broken about it. So, if you've selected both of those things, then we'll move on to the next slide. All right. So, where does your engine stall? If you're thinking of demand as an engine, you're thinking of something that is moving continuously and you want it to move smoothly all the time. If there's ever and we work with propeller shops and other folks that smooth out rough engines. So this is what we're doing with your sales process. If you've got um, on a car, it would be like a cylinder that's missing or something like that, where you've got a hesitation or something like that in your process. Uh, this is usually the reason. So, based on the arrow that you circled in our last slide, one of these is usually the problem. So, these are the most common problems at each of these phases. Um, I can think of examples all the way across. I mean, I've been in sales meetings where it's just like, I don't have all my tabs open. And so I'm like scrambling around trying to find what I need in order to answer the prospect's questions when I should have known that and I should have had it pulled up. Whatever it is that they were going to ask, I should have been able to anticipate that particular situation. Another one is response is slow. Sometimes people will email us, I've got 5,000 things going on that day, and I don't get back to them until the next day. And that's way too slow for a sales process. I need to be on top of those things and responding to inquiries about people, especially while they're in this sales window. Or ownership is unclear. That's not our problem because we only have one salesperson. In some organizations, you have two or more salespeople, and the handoffs can be awkward. Uh,
Well, not only that, is whether they will admit it or not, when you got more than one salesperson,
Mhm.
of conflict and
They're competing over the
somebody wants the sale and
Mhm.
how do you apportion and, and so on.
The commission. Yeah, if you've got a sales team, you've got a whole 'nother set of problems that it deserves its own webinar on, how to make sure that that's fair and make sure that you're not, messing up, the relationships between your sales team and having them fight over customers and everything else. So we won't go there today, but that's definitely a problem that we've seen. Or, if somebody says, "Well, I'm not gonna get the commission for this, so I'm out, and I completely abdicate any responsibility for this." That's happened as well. I think I've probably been on the, consumer end of that, um,
Yep.
where suddenly somebody stops returning your calls or emails because, you've just disqualified yourself, from this sales process by crossing some line or whatever, and then you're just out of luck and you have to find another company. All right. So everybody's identified their broken arrow and has identified the reason for their broken arrow. We'll continue. All right. So this is an example of that first broken arrow, from prospect to approach. What happens that is a problem and how do you fix it? So sometimes you have a whole list of prospects, and nowadays you can buy lists of prospects, or you can use ChatGPT to say, who are the top 10 most likely people to buy my product or service based on these criteria. There's a lot of things that you can do to get a great list, but you don't have a way of prioritizing that. There takes a human, thoughtful element to make that work. Or you might have a contact name without the buy-in context. So this person who's actually making the purchase might be the accountant. That's the person that signs all the checks, but they know nothing about what it is that they're buying. So that's not the person that you need to be explaining things to or making the sale to. And I've been halfway down a sales presentation before I realized I'm talking to somebody that doesn't even know what this product is, or doesn't even have a dog in the fight. They're just the person that writes the checks.
Yep.
Um, Generic messages that are prepared for everyone. So we've all been the victim of this, where we get spam, or DM spam, or text spam, or phone spam, or there's any number of flavors of spam nowadays that there weren't before, where you're getting a generic message that has nothing to do with you. So something that doesn't respond to the problems that you're having or concerns that you have today.
Even paper span.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, expensive. So I don't know what.
Mhm. People send a lot of direct mail to the wrong people, and, that's expensive and it kills trees, so we're very much against that. Alright. No agreed upon objective for the first interaction. So a lot of times when people come into that first consultation or sales call, they think I'm trying to sell them something when really what I'm trying to do is qualify them and trying to understand their problem. So, the first thing I want to do in a sales meeting is make sure that, or, as soon as a prospect approaches us, what is the objective for our first interaction? And it's really just, do you want to learn more about marketing in our situation? Not necessarily do you want to use our services or do you want to become a client or do you want any of those things? It's just, are you a person who is frustrated because your marketing isn't working? If the answer to that is no, then I have no business. You have no business being on my prospect list, and I have no business uh, taking your time any more than I already have. So once we get that down, we end up saving a lot of time for that. And these are the solutions to that. Um, what is the fit, the need, the timing, the relationship, the signal, what's causing, and a great question for that in a first approach or first call is, why are we talking today? You made the appointment to talk with us, or you're reaching out to me. Is something, did something happen recently to cause this, you to take your time with me today? And I didn't do that very and the interesting thing is you don't have to do this very well. You don't have to articulate it perfectly people get where you're saying, why is it that we're talking today? And usually it's because something has happened, or they have a show coming up, or something is they looked at their last quarter's numbers and they realize they've got a problem that we need to solve, and so on. Who matters? Who are the decision makers? Who influences that decision? Do they have a chief pilot or something that is not going to let them buy the software if it's not going to be easy for him to use? Who are the people who influence that decision? Who's actually going to be using this product or service? And who's the referral source? Who are all the players in uh, this drama that we're talking about today? If we're selling candy bars or T-shirts, that's all the same person. It's you're one salesperson, one prospect. That never happens in aviation because, there's almost always, unless you're talking with a solopreneur or something like that, and even then, they're putting on their different hats at different times during the conversation. So at one moment, you're talking to a very enthusiastic entrepreneur. At the next minute, you're talking to the guy who's going to have to explain to his wife or his board or his investor why he's spending this money. So you're talking to one person with several different hats. What's changed recently? There's almost always something like that. You let the client create their own urgency, as we talked about before. And what is the next link? So, what is the next thing that I can do for you? Do we need to do a report to show um, the results of action versus inaction? Do you need some case studies, so that you can see how this has worked for other clients? What would be the next logical thing that would take you the next step in the sales process? All right. You don't have to sell the whole chain. And, this is where we differ with Zig Ziglar. He's a sales guy, very charismatic from the 1950s, 1960s, who did a lot of sales training. And he was so into you have to close them on the first call or you will never see them again. But he was talking in the context of retail sales. Unfortunately, that's kind of stuck in the culture of salespeople. So that high pressure sales is a reason that a lot of folks don't like salespeople or, don't want to be known as a salesperson.
I think Sandler has modified that to where you have to sell the next 7 seconds. You got 7 seconds to sell the next 7 seconds.
Right. They actually use an analogy of a submarine where you're in the first chamber of the submarine and, how you can, in all of the submarine movies, you see when water's coming in or, something happens with the submarine and it's leaking water, you can seal off that compartment and everybody moves to the next compartment and everybody's safe. So basically you just move from one compartment to the next. You don't try to jump to the end. So Sandler, I think, did a really nice job of segmenting this out, especially for business to business sales. We take it a step further and talk about how we need to just sell that next step in the process. We're only trying to move the football one play. We're not trying to get a touchdown every single phone call or every single sales meeting. If it happens, the urgency is on the client side, not on our side.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, capture what happens by whatever means necessary. I love recording meetings and using ChatGPT. I think it does a really nice job of making sure we catch all those details and things that I didn't think were important in the first meeting suddenly resurface in the third or fourth meeting as the most important thing that we talked about. So, I may not write it down in my notes, but if you use the technology the way it's intended, you can get a lot more detail and be a lot more responsive to those little things. So, what's the handoff card? What happened? What's the next link? What should happen? What useful proof supports it? And who is responsible for it? In our organization, it's always me. As far as the prospect approach, etc., until they become a client, and then they become Angel's problem. But up until that point, it is a and in a lot of organizations there is a handoff, and I think you're introducing risk every time you do a handoff, unless you have fantastic documentation and fantastic records. All right.
You know,
Yeah.
with respect to the Cessna experience,
Hmm.
when I flew to Independence, they only changed people twice.
Okay.
Once was when I went in there, and the guy said, "No, here, let's go do all this stuff," and then introduced me to the IP that was going to give him a check ride,
Hmm.
and then the third one was a test pilot. After,
Gotcha. Okay, so 3 people, but they all work together.
yeah,
Fantastic. Yeah, and, the best organizations, that's pretty seamless, and you feel like you're being taken care of all the way through the process. So, one thing that has always driven me crazy is the name of a very popular email system called Constant Contact. Nobody wants constant contact, you know?
no.
Even with my kids, I don't want constant contact, right? Um,
Matter of
but
fact, let me just say it.
okay.
You don't want to email somebody 4 times
Mhm.
a day,
Right. Mhm.
not even daily. And I can tell you that one of the well-known sales, well, it's an organization that has tools for vehicles and things. I get an email from them multiple times a day,
Mm. Yeah.
and I haven't blocked them. Like, I don't know how to get it down to one email with the technology I've got.
Yeah.
So my choices are let it happen or block it.
Yeah.
Uh,
The other right.
Go on.
Okay, I was gonna say, you never want to become monotonous, in the way that you're communicating with the prospect. So, 4 emails a day, or even if the only way that you're communicating with somebody is email, that gets really boring really fast. So you really need to vary the medium, and you also need to vary the message. And here are some messages that we think are pretty helpful for these. You can do relevant insights, you can do buyer's guides, FAQs, case studies, proof, stories. People love stories. Events like this one, we can invite people to them. It gives us another reason to connect with people who are in our pipeline without it being another, um, so are you ready to buy yet? But that's the function of the communication, or one function of the communication, even if it's not the content of the communication. Decision support and follow up and other things like that. So all of those things are content. How you deliver that content could be LinkedIn posts, it could be short videos, it could be any number of different things. But you want to vary the media as well as varying the message. You should never contact somebody 3 times with the same message. I mean, that's just insane. People don't do that in real life, and they certainly shouldn't do that electronically either.
And I realize that what I just said is about a consumer organization, but still, we get a lot of multiple stuff from
Mhm,
businesses trying to sell us everything from money to cars to, you know,
mhm,
company. And
right.
it's just makes me not want to do business with them.
Mhm,
So
exactly.
that's just me. I mean, I'm not the target market, obviously. So
Yeah. Readiness signals, you may see these or you may not see these. They just happen in the client's, or in the prospect's mind. A deadline or an event or a planning window becomes real. Money they've been waiting for lands in their pocket. Um, they finally get the attention of their CEO, who says, "Yeah, we should do something about this." Um, some kind of urgency happens, usually on their side, not necessarily on our side. In a lot of cases, that does manifest as behavior that we can see, where they start replying to our emails, or they request something, or they ask a question, or they come to our website again. So, some of those buying signals, I love reviewing the reports. I mean, this is so nerdy. I love reviewing the reports for our email system because they tell us how many people have opened each email. They tell us, about a person, how many of our emails they have opened, which links they have clicked, and so on. And if I can review that before a sales meeting, then I have a pretty good idea of this is where this person's attention goes. But that's just email. That's one facet of the whole thing. I also want to know, where they visited on our website, how much time they spent, all of those things. I can't always put all those details together, but every detail I can get that, shows a buying signal is useful for that conversation so that I'm not wasting their time. I'm answering the questions that they have, not just questions they don't. All right. So, optimizing this handoff, this is the sales to relationship. The sale is not the end of the system. So, you have, I think Dan Kennedy once said, you don't, a lot of people will make a sale to get a customer, or a lot of people will build a relationship to make a sale. What we're doing is selling to build a relationship. So, once we have a relationship with a customer that likes us, whether or not they continue to do business with us, their circumstances might change. They may go off and do something else, but then they give us referrals or testimonials or case studies or strategic introductions or whatever. And we've got people who worked with us years and years ago that maybe working with us isn't appropriate for them for whatever reason, that send us business or make introductions or introduce us to people at events and other things. So every served customer that's happy is an asset, um, whether or not they stay with us and whether or not that even consummates in a sale.
Well, that's a good reason to go to MBA and stuff like that where you're seen.
Oh, absolutely. Right. So this is the operating layer. Um, Under every handoff, who's responsible, what starts the action, what should happen next, what supports the action, when is it due, and how will we know if this is successful or not? If one of these things is missing, we have another broken arrow. And they can be informal. I mean, not everything has to be documented to the nth degree. We kind of have opposite personalities on our team, which is great. I'm kind of a move fast and break things kind of a person. John is a dot every I and cross every T. And I think Angela falls in that category as well, as, much more polished than I am. But, because of our team, we do a really nice job of making sure that all of these things happen and pointing out, we need a process step to make sure that isn't dropped.
You realize, of course, that every time you say the term broken arrow,
Hmm.
that's military for a nuke disaster.
Oh, no, I did not know that. I had this fantastic metaphor and you went and ruined it. Okay. We'll have to come up with another one. So I'm open to ideas. If anybody who's watching this or whatever has a better idea for a better metaphor, we'll not.
If anybody that listens to this that it's military and hears that, they gotta go, what? Oh, okay.
Right. Okay.
Even they may not say that out loud, but
Hmm.
they're gonna think it.
So this is the difference between AI run amok and AI that's useful. You want to automate memory. You don't want to automate judgment. So you want to use those systems, use your ChatGPT to capture details and to capture the data and to remember these things and to see the patterns in the data and to surface that at the right time. But you want to use human judgment and human expertise on decisions that require context. And this is why we make such a great team with the robots. because we keep them in their place and make sure that we are taking over where we're supposed to be taking over and not let them run the show. All right. Okay. So this is the exercise. You are going to redesign one handoff based on what we talked about today. So you've circled one. Um, what can I say besides broken arrow? One step, one misstep in your process.
Go
You
ahead
can
and
say
say it.
this.
It's okay. I'm just saying.
Okay. So you've identified your broken arrow. Which handoff has the highest cost to delay or confusion? Um, if you do this once, you're going to become addicted to doing this. And, that's one of the great things about we do a workflow workshop every year, and our systems improve every year because of this. And if you look at ABCI now versus ABCI a year ago, things are so much less chaotic than they used to be. Even though they're kind of chaotic right now, we would not be able to manage this level of chaos without the systems that we've built over the last year. So choose the bottleneck, describe the current handoff, define the next link, build that six-part standard. Do you have an owner, a trigger, a next step, an asset, a timing, and a metric? In some cases, all you need to do is build an asset. Like maybe we need an info sheet here, or maybe we need a onboarding guide or something. Maybe we need a document. I always default to let's make a deliverable. Let's make a nice polished thing that we can hand somebody that answers all their questions at this phase. I'm very much in favorable of like one-page documents, that solve this problem. So this is kind of where my mind goes, but a lot of people's go other places, and there's a lot of good answers to this question. And then choose the first test. What can you change in the next 7 days? So, I do a lot of what we call, I guess, on the job training or ongoing education, whatever. If I attend a workshop and I don't do something differently in the next 7 days, I am never going to. And I have completely wasted an hour. And I can't afford to waste any hours. So, you want to take what you've learned today and choose your first test of how you applied it and whether or not it's working. And how will you know if it's working? All right. You want to be specific enough that another person could execute this handoff without asking what you meant. And this has been something that's changed. Um, Angel came on our team about 2 years ago. And before that, I would try to do everything myself, which was insane. But since bringing Angel on board, one of the things that she's done, or that you've done, I should say, because you're here, I won't talk about you like you're not here, um, is, you've been very, very disciplined about documenting processes so that you understand what I said. You're communicating it back to me, and I'm like, well, that's not quite what I meant, and we can talk about it and get it right. And then you can teach the next person, so that you can delegate. So that really makes a huge difference. And that's over 2 years compounded our ability to do work and to manage customers and to deliver quality results on a much higher level than we were 2 years ago. All right. So this is your 30-day implementation plan. So within 7 days, you're going to test it. You're going to make sure it works, and then you're going to expand that to your 30-day plan. One bottleneck, one owner, fix one handoff. Do it again 30 days from now. If you are constantly doing this and you're constantly tinkering, you're working on your business instead of in your business. And everybody says that, but they don't really tell you how. So the last hour has been telling you how, right? You want to spend just a little bit of time. And we have our habits. We do our Marketing Monday, Wins Wednesday, Follow Friday. This is a great habit for your Marketing Monday. Work on your business instead of in your business. Fix one thing. Look at it the next Monday. Did it fix anything? What were the results? How does your team feel about it? What have you found out since that you didn't know before? All right. So that's pretty much the process that we're going to follow today, or that we're going to follow going forward in the next 30 days. I would love to hear how you did, what happened, anything that you'd like to do differently or anything that you think would be um, great to add to this. We like to improve our workshops every year and go through this. But this is really the difference between marketing that works has to be a system. Rather than a single heroic act. A lot of people think of marketing as we're going to run a Super Bowl ad. We'll never have to advertise again because we'll have plenty of customers. Life will be good. Life is not a Disney movie. It is an ongoing situation. There is no happily ever after, or I guess we should say this is happily ever after, is continuous improvement. All right. So let's just go around the room. Anybody learn anything that they didn't know before?
For me, workflow improvement is really about making things easier to follow and reducing confusion. And with that, it will help each step move forward with lots of opportunity because everything will support the sale. It will stay connected with the relationship that we are building. And yeah, the demand engine is really about connection from the prospecting to the outreach to the follow-ups and to the relationships activities and something like that.
Perfect. Excellent. Spoken like a true master of process. John, anything we talked about that struck you particularly?
Well, I think I could improve on what I just said.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. And we have mini workshops every month. And so our next mini workshop is going to be about workflow management. So we're going to go jump into that with clients and see what we can do to fix some workflows. I'm excited. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, see y'all.